come on. Yes, sleep. Good Lord. Hello, everybody. No, this was not a performance of one of Philip Glass's pieces of music. You know, one of the ones where somebody sits down at the piano and nothing happens. I'm actually here. But I'm not going to put these on. No need. So, how's everybody doing? Crazy week, huh? Yes. Crazy week. But hopefully we will have plenty of positive things to think and talk about today as we consider things other than the election. Yay! All right, one final check to make sure that there isn't anything missing. Looks good. Then we'll get going. If you want to introduce yourselves, I see there's a few of you here already. Go ahead and say hi in the comment section. I'm celebrating the end of season 1 of In a Certain Kingdom, my podcast, where I retell Russian fairy tales, by buying a very sweet, I guess it's a Christmas beer. It's got flavors of honey and cherry, but it's nice. I like it. Trogs Brewery from Pennsylvania, for those of you who are keeping score. Trogs is an excellent brewery. Highly recommended. Hello, Deacon Michael. Very nice. Good to see you. Father David, hello. All right, let's get started, shall we? It's Friday. I'm sure we all want to go have dinner soon, so let's not have me pontificate too long on your lovely Friday evening. As you know, this is week 5 now. We skipped week 4 last week for a variety of reasons. One of which was I was almost physically dead from overwork, but there were other reasons as well, at least one of which was rather pleasant, and it included a visit from a young family with 3 children over in our house where there are already 3 children, so that was fun. But this is week 5 of Resilience and Courage Through Story. Those of you who have been paying attention know that I've been doing this series basically as a way of using the stories both in fantasy literature and in the Russian fairy tale tradition to illumine different ways in which we can deal with the present situation, deal with the present reality, but not simply in a way to survive it, but as a means of entering into our life more deeply and coming away from this reality which is surrounding us right now, more engaged with our authentic life, stronger through the process of going through it, and with a series of life experiences that will hopefully help us become deeper human beings in the future. And I based this series on the life of Aragorn. Those of you who, again, have seen these previous videos know this, because the life of Aragorn, as told in Appendix A of The Lord of the Rings, gives a very interesting narration about the life of Aragorn before the Lord of the Rings, and in it there's a complete system in how to become the kind of human being that Aragorn was, the kind of human being that can on his own back carry the fate of thousands and become the king of a lost and broken kingdom. There's going to be a lot of screaming today. It's been a long week, so I warn you all in advance. So we're actually going over the 4th and 5th steps of Aragorn's life as a model for us to be able to better handle hardship, especially unexpected hardship, and to come through it with a more deep life. The steps that we've covered so far in Aragorn's life are as follows. Find a mentor, but make sure that he or she is the right one. Seek solitude, because in that solitude there's a great secret, which is that there is both a chance for great contemplation and an opportunity for incredible joy. And then we talked rather controversially about trying out different ideas, including bad ones, or ones that we consider to be bad, by delving deeply into their hearts, testing them out, keeping in mind, though, the teachings and the instruction and the guidance of our mentors. And today, we're supposed to talk about finding a craft and becoming good at it. but also in parallel to that, seeking a course of study and delving deeply into it. So craft in this case, in this sense, is not simply something you do with your hands, but it is a way of relating to life that involves an exclusive and deep engagement with both ideas and talents or habits in a way that inevitably will help us engage with life more deeply. I apologize about the my second son, my third child, has recently found that a very certain tone of voice and screech is very effective at getting what he wants, especially when everybody's tired in the evening. But I digress. And we are going to conclude today's video with the fifth step in Aragorn's journey to becoming a more deep human being, and that is accepting your doom, which I think is appropriate considering that this week is election week, or whatever you want to call it. Goodness knows, I don't know what to call this weird and bizarre and strange madness that we call election week or whatever. So there actually is a lot of very, very good information online about how to become good at a craft. I'll share some of it, both in short and long form, in my newsletter on Tuesday. I send a newsletter every week during the course of this series where I share not simply my own pontifications about nothing, but the ideas of people far more advanced and far more adept and talented than I about the subjects that we talked about on the Friday. So if that's something that interests you, if you'd like book recommendations, article recommendations, music recommendations, YouTube video recommendations about the deep life and about the reader's life and the writer's life, then go ahead and sign up at nicholaskotar.com/resilience, and you will get the next email on Tuesday, as well as an archive of the previous emails in this series. But I really don't want to talk about the specifics of how to become good at a craft or how to craft a habit. I'll share what I wanted to really talk about is what that reality means in terms of our internal life. The interior reality that corresponds to the wholehearted giving of yourself to difficult tasks that you undertake for the sake of self-improvement, and for the sake of deepening both your physical and your spiritual life, because that's how I see craft, both in the sense of doing something with your hands and in the sense of delving deeply into a course of study. To do that properly, I'm going to read to you from a short essay by Ivan Ilyn, a Russian philosopher of the early 20th century. I shared this essay on the last episode of my podcast. It's short, so if you've heard it already, hang on, it's not going to take very long. But I think it's worth reading several times to really understand what it is that he's getting at. This essay is called On the Illumination of the Heart, and this is my own translation of it. We, the generation of a new age, shouldn't delude ourselves. The crisis that we are suffering right now is not only a political or an economic one. It is a crisis of spirit. Its reasons go far back, and yes, we are talking about ultimate things here. We shouldn't diminish the tragedy of our time. We have to find within ourselves the necessary courage and soberly assess everything that is happening around us. We need to gather our will, look truth directly in the eye, and then stand on the path of renewal. We have to shrug off the petty realities of the everyday and look into the distance to understand where the world is going, what awaits us, and what we have to do to avoid an even worse fate. But more than that, to begin a new and glorious life. But you can only look into the distance by first looking within. That means that we have to descend into the living depths of our own essence, into that spiritual potential, the divine source of which Christ himself informed us. In all the corners of the world, people must come back to themselves, whether that is an individual, a small group, a parish, an organization, a cultural movement, and so on. We have to concentrate on the ultimate things of our life. We have to plug into them through the living contemplation of our hearts, so that we may come to know how things must be, how things are, and what we still lack. And the more seriously, the more sincerely, the more thoroughly we will begin this work on ourselves, the better it will be for us. For the difficulties of our time are truly indescribable, and we can only overcome them when we will reach down to the deepest layers of the human spirit. And that does mean when people will begin their return towards God. I'm going to stop here for a second to address a question from Seraphim, who asks, I would be interested in how Ilyn understood the New Age. Any clues? Now, Ilyn was was an idealist. He was a Hegelian idealist. And he has some very specific and technical language about what this new age might look like. I don't know enough of Hegel's philosophy to be able to correctly interpret Ilyn's version of it, but he was very much of a certain kind of cultural movement in Russia. End of 19th, early 20th century, Serafim, was a time when we had apocalyptic thinking. I think he honestly believes that there might be some sort of final golden age before the end. And that this age is going to be, whether final or not, one in which the physical realities of man and the spiritual internal reality of man becomes combined in a perfect symphony of the divine and human potential of the person, of the human being, and then expressed outwards through an engagement as a creative act. He calls it a creative act. He uses that phrase constantly. That will then transform the outside world, but only after there has been a kind of internal purification happening on an individual and societal level, both. And maybe you'll understand more when I read the rest of this essay. Only then, he says, can there be an epochal renewal of history? For as we see today, all the roads of the past have been walked already. The previous structure of our common creative cultural act has brought us to utter coldness of heart and to a mechanization of the mind. The hour approaches when we, having come to know the absolute necessity of renewal, will again begin to seek help from above. We live in a landmark age. Never before has the dark underbelly of human nature so confidently and proudly showed itself on the outside. Never before have there been so many obvious attempts to wrest power and to submit others to that power. Never before in human history have there been so many technical advances, but also so many weapons of mass destruction. We are at the turning point, as you can see. We are at its very center. The previous equilibrium, such as it was, is gone. The worst that is still to come we can only oppose, having begun our renewal from within. We will know its first signs by a kind of illumination that begins to shine forth from renewed people. This ray of light, this illumination, is represented by actions of life-giving goodness, by contemplation of the heart, by strong good conscience, and by courageous and calm faith. And until we have awoken within ourselves this spiritual instinct, until we have forced our hearts to speak, until we have brought our hearts into movement, not into deadness as we have up to this point, we will not be able to touch the deepest levels of our human divine depth. Only a living heart will begin to send out its rays into the world, and the light that will come from it will be something ineffable, something more than physical light. More and more often we hear voices telling us that the nations will only be saved through some kind of new revelation. But in actual fact, we simply were not able to assimilate the revelation given to us. We were not able to live it as we must. Modern man must come to understand that his fate depends on him becoming a ray of light for the world in all aspects of his life. He must understand that we are talking about a purification and enlivening of the inner heart, of man's creative, self-sacrificial act. After all, the extinguished heart is powerless and blind. When it looks at life, it cannot be expected to see anything good in it. Only the illumined heart is capable of renewing culture. Only in such a heart can new and creative ideas arise. So in the context of this week's election, and I hope you found those words both comforting and challenging as I do. I think Ilyn's work is fascinating because there's so many layers to it. But anyway, in the context of this week's election, with the unrest and frankly the chaos that has arisen and probably will continue to arise in more and more distressing ways, this message of Ilyn's is especially poignant to me. But this is not only because I believe it to be true, which I do, it's also because I recognize without a shadow of a doubt that much of the current problems in the world, the anxiety that we feel, that everybody around us seems to be feeling, is actually a product of something that is not external, or rather that is not imposed on us from the outside. It's a product of something else. We're living through, as Nicholas Kotar argues in his fantastic book, The Shallows, which I'm reading right now, I'm going to quote from at the moment. He's making the argument that we're going through a shift in the culture and in the society that is similar to Gutenberg's invention of the movable type, of the printing press. Because, as Marshall McLuhan said, if the medium is the message, that means that the medium will determine the way that we engage with the message as well. And if we have been living through 500 years or so of long form, complicated, written culture in the form of the printed book, what we are living through now is something entirely, entirely different. The internet and the way we interact with it has actually changed our brains. And it hasn't been for the better. Nicholas Kotar makes the case that, quote, the possibility of intellectual decay is inherent in the malleability of our brains. He makes this point after making it very clear that the current science of neurobiology shows very clearly that our brains are not frozen mechanistic organs that are formed in childhood and then never again change throughout adulthood. In fact, they're quite elastic. Or I think he uses the term plastic, which means that they can easily change, but they cannot easily change back. So it's not like a rubber band that you spring it, you tighten and then you let it go and it goes back to its original form. It's more like a piece of one of those gummy children's toys that you stretch it out and it stays stretched out and it doesn't come back into its original form. Nicholas Kotar continues and he says that we want to believe that the impressions our brain record as sensations and stores as memories leaves no physical imprint on its own structure, on our body. To believe otherwise would, we feel, call into question the integrity of the human self. That was certainly how I felt, says Nicholas Kotar. But I was wrong. Our conception of information through the scattered and non-focused medium of the internet is changing the way we think, and it's actually changing the way we are. We no longer are able to hold onto a thought long enough to determine its validity very often, unless we engage consciously with long-form thinking, long-form writing. And do you know what that actually means? It means that we can be controlled very easily. By what? By the kind of information that is spread out in the loudest and most obvious and the most obnoxious spurts, because the internet favors loud, obnoxious, easy to see, easy to read, short form information. And who is doing the featuring? Who is doing the censoring? Who's making sure that the information that we get is the information that we get? Well, it's not any people that have any sort of care for you as a human being, except insofar as the time that you spend on their technology means money in their pockets. That's how Facebook works. That's how Twitter works. That's how all social networks work. That's why craft, getting back to our original point, dedicating yourself to a deep habit that involves the doing of something with your hands and the thinking of something profound with your brains and the engaging with that with the whole person, and engaging with that craft through your own reality, internal reality, in the way that Ilyn suggests by descending into your deep heart is so important. As Ilyn suggests, it's the only way to change the world for the better. And that, of course, leads to Aragorn's fifth step in preparing to assume the command of the lands of men in Middle-earth. He accepts his doom. He accepts the reality that he is a king with no throne, that he is a king who has to live a life as a beggared wanderer. I think we have to admit and accept that we have to do the same. We have to accept the doom, our personal doom. Doom, not in the sense of doom and gloom, in the sense of the lot that is given to us by the circumstances that the world has offered. Accept that doom, that reality of living in a fragmented, messed up period of history. That's what this is. Accept that outside forces will probably do little to change that. And yes, I'm going to say the thing that nobody wants to hear probably, that no matter who is elected, things, generally speaking, will not change all that much. They might change on a small scale, and on a day-to-day scale, they're not going to change in terms of the general large-scale trends of history and of our lives. So accepting our doom means committing ourselves then to the descent into the heart, because that is the way towards epochal change. Change of yourself, change of others. I'm committing myself to it. Ilyn's path is a hard one, I'm sure of it. And I know because whenever I try something difficult, whether it's with my hands or with my mind, My brain doesn't want to do it because that's how we are made. We are made to prefer things that we have been habituated to. But there's also reality that our minds are able to embrace difficult and seemingly impossible things with the necessary amount of effort, desire, and will. So how am I going to do it? Well, I'm going to do it by spending a lot more time reading. I often complain about the size of my TBR pile, as they're called. But for a long time, I've just complained about it, not done much about it, except for reading a few novels here and there. But it's time to get deep. It's time to challenge myself. It's time to read Aristotle. It's time to read Plato. It's time to catch up on the classics of philosophy. It's time to read books like Underland by Robert Macfarlane. Incredible, fascinating book. Highly recommended. It's time to look at what the internet is doing to our brains. The Shallows by Nicholas Kotar. Time to read some Ray Bradbury, Zen and the Art of Writing. Time to dedicate a little more time to translation. Maybe have another Ivan Ilyn book, a book of essays translated, perhaps coming out in the near future. What else? Reading The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey, which, by the way, is not a self-help book. It's a fantastic, wonderful guide to reorienting the way you think and the way you live. And what else? Well, I'm spending a lot more time away from screens. I'm limiting screen time to certain hours of the day. And I'm keeping my phone away from myself in the evenings so that I can give myself entirely to my children. And I'm engaging my body in various ways that don't involve participation in and engagement with a screen. And I encourage you all to do the same. We're going into probably what's going to be a rather odd and difficult year. The fact that Biden is probably going to win means that there's going to be a much harder line response to the current rise of COVID. Well, whatever you think about that reality, that seems to be obvious, which means that we're probably going to be locked down again at some point. And if not, at the very least, people are going to be afraid for another year at least. If you look at the general sort of rhythm of pandemics, they tend to go for about 12, 16, 24 months. So we're not even halfway through. What better time then to maximize what we have already around us, assuming we have a home, assuming we have the stability and the ability to actually dedicate time to do something other than work. And if you don't, then I'm not suggesting that you must, of course. I know that many people are not doing well. Many people are in financial difficulties who have never been in financial difficulties before. I know that some people will be short on food for the first time in their lives. And for people like that, all I can say is find time to read stories. Don't worry so much about improving yourself in the way that I'm talking here. For those of us who are suffering during this time, the best thing I think we can do is seek consolation. And if for many of us it's difficult to find that consolation in the traditional places, or perhaps the church is close to us because of COVID reasons, then sometimes the first step towards that is actually finding the consolation of a good and well-told story. Because those things are easy to find and they provide the kind of calm that can then help us start to think more deeply about what is important in life. And I don't want to get sermonizing here over here. I just want to share my thoughts about this. It's an odd time, but it's a time with a lot of opportunity, I think. And I hope that you have the time and the space and the ability to consider that and to possibly start descending deep into the heart, like Ilyn suggests that we all must. Because the more of us, the more people around that decide to do that, the better it will be for the world around us. I'm completely convinced and sure about that. So that's all I wanted to say today. We have one more video left, and that's going to be the video about the outward movement of the heart that has already been transformed. So what I'm going to be talking about is really not from experience, because this is definitely not what I have mastered. It's something that Aragorn did master, so it's going to be highly hypothetical, but it's going to examine what it means to actually change the world after you've begun the difficult, hard work of using craft to descend deeply into yourself. And I hope that these videos have been useful and have been interesting to you all. And again, if you are interested in a more broad source of information about these various topics, I offer them in my newsletter, which I've been sending every week. If you'd like to sign up, it is at nicholaskotar.com/resilience. And if you are interested also in receiving a special offer for a course that I'm going to be launching soon on the craft of writing, speaking of craft, that will be launching at the end of November, early December, then definitely sign up, because that list will receive early notification and discount codes. So be sure to do that if that is something that you are interested in. But in the meantime, for this week, this crazy, insane week, which is still going on, I wish you all a lovely Friday evening, and I hope you will find the time and the space and the opportunity to read something beautiful, read something consoling, and then pass on that consolation to somebody else. In the meantime, I will say goodnight and wish you all a wonderful and calm and encouraging and craft-filled weekend. Hope you're all doing well. See you all next week at 5 p.m. Eastern next Friday. Bye-bye.